I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, the small guest room at the end of the hallway that my son had offered me 18 months ago when I sold my house in Tucson. And I listened to the silence after what I'd just heard. My hands were folded in my lap. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I thought I would shake. The words were still in the air somehow. The way certain things stay with you after someone says them, not because they were beautiful, but because they were so sharp. She is not our responsibility. She has never been our responsibility. She has never been our responsibility, and I am done pretending otherwise. That was my daughter-in-law talking about me. To my son. In their kitchen. 11 feet from where I was sitting. I had come out to get a glass of water. My throat had been dry all evening, a side effect of the new medication Dr. Harmon had started me on after my diagnosis 3 weeks prior. Stage 2. We caught it early, he said. You have options, he said. I had driven home from that appointment alone, sat in the car in the driveway for 20 minutes, and then gone inside and made dinner because my son, Ryan, and his wife, Claudia, had asked me to have something ready by 6. I hadn't told them yet. I was waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment for something like that. I know that now. I turned around that night without getting my water, went back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat in the dark for a long time. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start in that guest room. It starts in Tucson, in the house where I raised Ryan, the house his father and I bought the year he was born. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a lemon tree, a neighborhood where I knew every name on every mailbox. My husband, Gerald, died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, the way that one is. We had 31 years together, and then we had 7 months of hospitals and hospice and holding his hand, and then I was alone. I managed. That's what I did. I'm 67 years old now, and I have spent most of my life managing things. I taught middle school English for 22 years. I raised a son mostly on my own after Gerald got sick the first time. A different sickness, back when Ryan was 13. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet from a YouTube video at age 61. I am not someone who falls apart, but the house got quiet after Gerald. And Ryan, my only child, my son who called every Sunday, who always remembered my birthday. Ryan was in Atlanta. He'd moved there for work 8 years ago, met Claudia 2 years after that, married her in a small ceremony in Savannah that I flew to alone because Gerald had already been gone a year by then. Claudia was fine. That's the word I always used. Fine. She was organized, efficient, kept a beautiful home. She called me Gloria, my actual name, while her own mother was Mom and Mama and various other warm variations. It was a small thing. I told myself it was a small thing. When I got a clean bill of health at my annual checkup 2 years ago, Brian called and said, Mom, have you ever thought about moving closer? You're getting older. We've got the space. And honestly, it would be good for all of us. I thought about it for 4 months. I made lists. I prayed about it. I called my friend Vera in Tucson, my oldest friend, the one who knew Gerald before I did, and she said, Gloria, you go where your people are. So I sold the house with the lemon tree. I packed up 38 years. I moved into the guest room in my son's house in Atlanta, Georgia, and I tried very hard to be the kind of woman who didn't take up too much space. I cooked. I cleaned up after myself immediately. I offered to help with my granddaughters, Ryan and Claudia's 2 girls, Lily and June, who were 6 and 4 at the time and who I loved with the kind of love that surprises you with its intensity. I babysat when they asked. I didn't offer opinions on parenting unless asked. I paid a portion of the utilities every month, insisted on it, even though Ryan kept saying it wasn't necessary. I thought things were going reasonably well. Then the diagnosis. The full word is breast cancer. Stage 2. Caught in a routine mammogram. Dr. Harmon, a very calm man with reading glasses he was always misplacing, sat across from me and explained the options. Lumpectomy followed by radiation. Possibly chemotherapy depending on how things responded. A good prognosis, he said. Many women in my situation go on to live full, healthy lives for decades. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the dark listening to my daughter-in-law tell my son that I was not their responsibility. I heard Ryan say something low and murmured that I couldn't make out. Claudia's voice again, Ryan, I love you. But I did not sign up for this. I have 2 kids and a full-time job, and I cannot be someone's caretaker. I cannot. We need to think about what makes sense for our family. Then she has money. She sold that house. She can figure something out. Quiet. Then Ryan again, still too low to hear. Then Claudia, I'm serious. I need you to think about this. I need her to have another plan. I sat with that for a long time. Here's what I did not do. I did not walk into that kitchen. I did not cry. I did not call Vera in Tucson at 10:30 at night, though I wanted to. I did not lie awake catastrophizing. What I did was open the Notes app on my phone and start writing things down. Dollar amounts, account numbers, names of people I needed to call. I've always been a list person. When life gets uncertain, I make lists. It's not cold, it's how I survive. The list I made that night was very specific. What Claudia did not know, what Ryan may have half known but never fully focused on, was that Gerald had been a careful man. A quiet, thorough, careful man who spent 30 years in insurance and understood, better than most people, that life had a way of rearranging itself without notice. When he died, he left me the house, his life insurance policy, just under $400,000 after the medical bills, and a brokerage account he'd been building for 20 years. The brokerage account had never come up in conversation with Ryan and Claudia. There was no reason for it to. It was mine. It was Gerald's gift to me, his way of making sure I would be okay when he was gone. By the time I moved to Atlanta, between the house sale and the investments, I had a little over $620,000 in assets. Not wealthy, not by Atlanta standards especially, but solid. More than enough to be someone who had choices. I had never mentioned the specific number to Ryan. I mentioned I was comfortable. I mentioned I didn't need financial help. I never said $620,000 because it wasn't relevant. I wasn't trying to hide it. I was trying not to make money a thing between us. That night in the dark, it became a thing. The next morning, I made breakfast. Oatmeal with blueberries for the girls, coffee for Ryan and Claudia. And I smiled at everyone and no one said anything unusual. Claudia was efficient and pleasant the way she always was. Ryan kissed me on the cheek on his way out the door. The girls argued over a purple crayon. I cleared the dishes. I went to my room. I called a real estate agent. Her name was Darlene, a woman who had been recommended by Vera's cousin who lived in the Decatur area just outside Atlanta. I had actually saved her number 4 months ago for reasons I couldn't fully explain at the time. Some part of me had been making this plan before I knew I was making it. I told Darlene I was looking for a 2-bedroom condo or small house, somewhere quiet. Good natural light, accessible. I was about to start radiation treatment and I wanted to make sure I wasn't dealing with a lot of stairs. My budget was up to $280,000. She had 3 options for me within the week. While I was looking at properties, I also called my attorney, a woman named Susan Fielding, who had handled my estate planning after Gerald died, and whom I trusted absolutely. I asked her to review my will. The existing document left the majority of my estate split between Ryan and a list of charitable organizations Gerald and I had supported. I told Susan I wanted to make some changes. I wasn't acting out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I was acting out of clarity. There is a difference, and I knew the difference that week, even if I couldn't have explained it perfectly to someone else. I also scheduled my pre-treatment consultation with the oncology team at Emory. I arranged for a friend of Darlene's to help me move. I did not tell Ryan or Claudia any of this. I did tell them about the cancer. I decided to wait until I had a plan, and now I had one, so I told them on a Thursday evening after the girls were in bed. I sat them both down in the living room and I told them, calmly and clearly, that I had been diagnosed 6 weeks prior, that my prognosis was good, that I was starting treatment at Emory, and that I wanted them to hear it from me rather than find out some other way. The silence that followed was the kind you can feel. Ryan went pale. He started to say something and his voice broke and he had to stop. He reached over and took my hand. Claudia sat very still. After a long moment, she said, Gloria, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. She sounded sorry. She sounded sorry. She sounded sorry. She looked it even. I believe she genuinely felt something in that moment. But I also remembered what I had heard through the wall. She's not our responsibility. And I had made my list. I thanked them both. I told them not to worry. I told them I had everything handled. I don't think they believed me, which is fine. I found the condo a week later. Second floor of a small building in Decatur, 2 bedrooms, good light from the south-facing windows, a little balcony where I immediately imagined putting a container garden in the spring. The building had an elevator. The neighborhood had a grocery store 2 blocks away and a library 4 blocks from that. I made an offer the same afternoon I walked through it. I did not tell Ryan I was looking. I told him on a Sunday evening, 3 weeks after the cancer conversation. I said, I've put an offer on a condo in Decatur and it's been accepted. I'll be moving out at the end of next month. He looked like I'd said something in a foreign language. What? Mom, why? You don't have to. I know I don't have to, I said. I want to. It'll be better for everyone. Claudia was very quiet during that conversation. She didn't look the way I might have expected her to look. She looked honestly a little frightened. Ryan pushed back. He said I shouldn't be alone during treatment. He said they had the space. He said I was being stubborn. I told him I had a treatment schedule, I had a plan, I had good neighbors in the new building, and I had Darlene, who had turned out to be a genuinely kind person who had already offered to drive me to my first 2 radiation appointments. I told him I would still see the girls as often as they wanted. I told him I loved him. Then I started packing. Let me tell you what radiation is like, because I think people don't talk about it honestly enough. It is tedious and exhausting in a way that's hard to describe. You are not in pain in some dramatic sense. You are just profoundly tired, a tiredness that gets into your bones, and you have to keep going to appointments that feel endless, and you have to manage everything, your medications, your diet, your rest, while also trying to maintain some version of a life. I managed. That's what I do. Darlene drove me to my first several appointments until I felt confident enough to take myself, my new neighbor, a woman named Harriet, who's 72 and had come through her own cancer treatment 5 years before, knocked on my door the second day after I moved in with the casserole and a list of practical advice that was more useful than anything I'd read online. She became one of the most important people in my life during those months. Ryan called often. He came to 2 of my treatments. He was attentive and clearly guilty, and I could see him trying, so I let him try. Claudia called occasionally. She was polite. She asked careful questions about my health. She did not mention the guest room or the conversation I had heard. I did not bring it up. But something had shifted in her, and I think I understood why. Because here's what happened about 6 weeks after I moved out. Ryan called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual. He almost always called in the evenings. His voice had a particular quality I recognized from when he was a teenager and had done something wrong and needed to work up to telling me. After some small talk, he said, Mom, I have to tell you something. It turned out that Claudia's company had conducted layoffs, and Claudia had been among those let go. Suddenly, with me no longer there to help with the girls after school, they needed to arrange paid childcare. Suddenly, the budget was tighter than it had been. Suddenly, he said, things were more stressful. I listened. I did not say anything I was thinking. Then he said, and honestly, Mom, some stuff has come up with some money I owe. It's complicated, and I don't want to get into all of it, but I could really use some help. I was wondering if you'd be able to loan me some money. I asked how much. He said $25,000. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, tell me what it's for, Ryan. What came out haltingly over the next 15 minutes was this. He had been making what he called investments over the past 2 years, an online trading platform, a sports betting app, a few other things he described vaguely, and he had lost, in total, somewhere around $40,000. Some of it was on a credit card, some of it was on a loan from a colleague. He was behind on the loan. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked out at my little balcony in the October afternoon light. I said, does Claudia know? Long pause. Not all of it, I said. I think she needs to know all of it. He said, Mom, I said, Ryan, I love you. I would do almost anything for you. But I'm not going to hand you $25,000 to solve a problem that your wife doesn't know exists. That's not something I'm willing to do. He was quiet. I said, you need to talk to Claudia. And I think you need to talk to someone professional, A financial counselor, or a therapist, or both. What you're describing has a name, and it's treatable, but not by me handing you a check." He didn't respond well to that in the moment. The call ended shortly after. Not in a fight exactly, but in a chill. Claudia called me 2 weeks later. I don't know exactly what happened in those 2 weeks in their house. Ryan didn't tell me everything. But Claudia called on a Saturday morning and asked if she could come see me. Just the two of us. She arrived at my condo around 11. She sat at my kitchen table and wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee, and she didn't look at me for a little while. Then she said, "Gloria, I owe you an apology." I waited. She said she didn't know I had heard her that night in the kitchen. She said she had been under a lot of pressure. Work, the kids, adjusting to having another person in the house. And she had said things she didn't mean. Or maybe things she'd meant in the moment, but not really. Not in the way they came out. She said, "I've been thinking about it since Ryan told me you heard. I've been sick about it." I looked at her across the table. This woman who had been in my life for 9 years. Who I had tried to build something with carefully in the way you do with someone who married your child. I said, "I appreciate you coming to say that." She looked up then. I said, "I want you to know that I'm not angry. I moved out because it was the right decision for everyone, including me. I'm not punishing you. The condo is good for me. Being in my own space during treatment has actually been good for me." She nodded. Her eyes were wet. I said, "But I also want to say something, and I need you to hear it clearly." She nodded again. I said, "I am Ryan's mother. I am Lily and June's grandmother. That is not going to change. What I have and what I choose to do with it is my business. And believe me, Claudia, I have more business than you probably realize. But I am not a burden, and I am not a problem to be managed. I have never been those things, and going forward, I need us to understand each other on that point." She was crying by the end of that. She said she understood. I think she did. I think she does. My treatment ended in December. The follow-up scans in February showed what Dr. Harmon called an excellent response. He used the word optimistic. He misplaced his glasses twice during the appointment, and both times they were on his head. And I laughed both times, and he seemed pleased that I was laughing. I was laughing. I am laughing now, most days. In a way I wasn't sure I would be when I was sitting in that dark room last spring, wondering how to survive what was happening. I planted containers on my balcony in March. Tomatoes, herbs, a small pot of zinnias, because Gerald always liked zinnias, and I decided I was allowed to like things just because he had liked them. Harriet helped me arrange them. She has opinions about tomato placement that are strong and not entirely wrong. Ryan and I talk every Sunday again. He is in financial counseling. He told me that himself, volunteered it, which I took as a good sign. The gambling, that's the accurate word, even if he resists it, had been going on longer than I knew, quietly, underneath the surface of a life that looked fine from the outside. He is working on it. I believe him. I updated my will. The charitable organizations Gerald and I loved are still in it. Ryan is still in it, with conditions and a trustee structure that Susan helped me design, which protects the money from being used in ways I wouldn't sanction. I also added a separate education fund for Lily and June that goes directly to them, untouched, when they turn 25. Claudia knows about the money now. Ryan told her eventually, more out of necessity than choice, but he told her. The number surprised her. I could tell, when she referenced it indirectly one evening over dinner, that it had rearranged something in how she understood our situation. I said nothing about it directly. Some things don't need to be said. I bring zinnias to Sunday dinners sometimes. Lily always wants to hold them in the car. I am not the woman who sat in the dark last spring, though I remember her clearly. I remember how still she was. I remember making that list in the Notes app. That clean, specific list that said, "Here is what is mine. Here is what I can do. Here is what I will not accept." I remember closing the app and lying down on the bed and looking up at the dark ceiling and thinking, very quietly, I am not done. I wasn't. I'm not. If you are sitting somewhere right now in your own quiet room, after your own sharp words that you were not supposed to hear, I want you to know that the list helps. Clarity helps. Moving through the pain toward what is actually yours, what no one can take, that helps. You do not have to be finished. Please stay with me until the end, because I want to share with you what happened next. And I promise you, It is the part of the story that I think about every single morning when I walk out to water my tomatoes in the early light before anyone else is awake, in the home that is entirely, completely mine. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to act with dignity when someone has made it clear they don't see your worth. Not talking about it, not performing it, actually doing it. In the quiet moments when no one is watching and you could just as easily fall apart. When I heard Claudia say those words through the wall, my first instinct was shame, not anger. Shame. Which I think is what happens when you've spent too long trying to make yourself small enough to fit into someone else's life without disrupting it. You start to believe, somewhere underneath everything, that maybe they're right. Maybe you are too much. Maybe the timing is bad. Maybe you should apologize for needing anything at all. What pulled me back from that edge wasn't bravery. It was clarity. I sat in that dark room, and I thought about who I actually was before I started shrinking. A woman who raised a son alone through hard years. A teacher. A widow who learned to fix leaky faucets from the internet at 61. Someone who had built something real, quietly, over decades. Not because anyone was watching, but because that's what you do when you have integrity. Integrity isn't loud. That's the thing I keep coming back to. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in the list you make at 11 o'clock at night when you could be dissolving. It shows up in the real estate agent's number you saved 4 months ago for reasons you couldn't explain. It shows up in every small, deliberate choice to keep going, not to prove something to someone else, but because you know your own value even when the room is dark and silent. Ryan's situation taught me something equally important about what happens when people make choices without honesty. He spent 2 years hiding something that was quietly destroying the financial foundation of his family. Not because he was a bad person, he isn't, but because he let fear make his decisions instead of letting honesty make them. The consequences weren't punishment from the universe. They were simply the natural result of what he'd set in motion. Money borrowed in secret has to be repaid. Trust avoided doesn't disappear. It just accumulates interest. And Claudia, I've thought about her a great deal. She said what she said because she was overwhelmed and frightened and hadn't yet done the harder work of examining what she actually believed about family, about aging, about what we owe each other. When her own circumstances changed, when the job ended, when the money got tight, when Ryan's secrets surfaced, she had to do that work whether she was ready or not. That's not justice in any theatrical sense. That's just how cause and effect move through a life. What I want to say to anyone who is sitting somewhere right now feeling like Gloria in that dark room is this. Your clarity is a form of courage. Making the list when you could be crying, that is courage. Calling the attorney, calling the real estate agent, scheduling the treatment, walking out with your head level. All of it, courage. Not the kind that looks impressive from the outside, the quiet kind. The kind that sustains you through radiation appointments and lonely mornings and the strange grief of realizing someone you loved saw you differently than you saw yourself. The tomatoes are doing well, by the way. Harriet was right about the placement, and I am, by every measure that matters, doing better than fine.